Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're gonna be jumping into another session of Epic 7L today. Gonna be looking at another balanced adjustment preview. Now this time around, we got quite a treat, because there are 5 heroes, 1 artifact, an entire lasting effect, and mage constellations are all changing. Now these changes are scheduled to take effect on March 14th, so let's go ahead and read over them. I looked over them this morning before I went to work, but thought I'd share my opinions with you guys here, especially because these changes tend to be pretty impactful on the meta, especially in RTA. And with the last wave of balance adjustments, people were kind of not happy with them, but they actually turned out to be very impactful on the meta. Even things as minor as Specimen Says' buff ended up making him a viable choice to bring into RTA, right? He's not a meme or a joke character anymore. He's actually a really good unit, and with just a minor tweak. So let's get into this. The 5-star heroes that we're going to see are Little Queen Charlotte, Top Model Luluka, and Requiem Rana. So all of the changes here are ML5s. No RGB 5 stars are getting buffed here, but that's okay. I feel like this is fine because it's a smaller balance patch, and smaller balance patches tend to be a bit more impactful than the larger ones that we see because they tend to put filler in some of the larger ones. Now we do see a little bit of filler here. Clarissa for some PVE content. We'll get to that in a second. And Falconer Kluri. So there's only it's only Falconer Kluri, the specialty change, so it's probably something to do with her runes and her skill tree, but we'll get to that later as well. 5-star artifact that's getting changed is the guild artifact Victorious Flag. It's actually the one I have not bought out from the shop at all, because it was just a terrible effect. I didn't want it. It's okay for PvE content, but outside of that, it kind of sucked. They're changing the effect to Rage, not the Rage set, but the Rage buff, like the thing that Mort gets for himself. I think there's a couple other units that also get it, like Corvus, I think, Fire Corvus, and a couple others, but it's not a very popular buff, but hey, this might mean that we're going to see more units in the future come out with it. And it's typically what Smilegate does with these types of things, right? And we're going to see the 4 mage constellations change here for Leo, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the first buff. So Little Queen Charlotte, yeah, as you can see here, not much has changed. The only thing that they added here was that when the enemy is defeated, they inflict extinction. So this is actually kind of good. This is on her S3, by the way. And the reason why this is actually really good is because Little Queen Charlotte is brought into standard v standard matches usually. You bring her to nuke down an opponent's dark unit, right? Things like ML Kens, APOC Ravius, and things of that sort. Abyssal Euphines, for example. This is mostly for Abyssal Euphine, I would say, because she's run so much on Holy Sacrifice that if you try to nuke her with LQC, she's just going to come back, and LQC has a long cooldown for S3, so you're going to get punished. You're probably just going to die straight out when they revive if Little Queen Charlotte's like your only DPS, right? So in a 1v1 situation, if you have a single DPS and they have a single DPS, Little Queen Charlotte would actually put you in a pretty big advantage now. I'm a huge fan of Little Queen Charlotte. I don't have Savior Aiden, as you guys know, if you've been watching me on the channel for a while. And yeah, LQC, amazing unit against dark units. Obviously, she's kind of outshined in many aspects by Savior Aiden because she's so much more flexible and splashable into teams. But yeah, LQC getting a well-deserved little buff here. Now, while that might not seem super impactful, this is. Her imprint concentrations is changing from defense percent to critical hit chance, and that is huge. Most people don't even max out crit rate on Little Queen Charlotte because she's mostly, you mostly run on Hellcutter, so she stacks up crit rate that way. What this allows you to do is actually get rid of essentially almost all your crit rate on your LQC, on your gears, right? So you don't have to mod for crit rate to get up to that weird awkward 70 to 76% crit ratio for your Hellcutter optimization, right, against dark units and stuff like that. So yeah, this crit chance imprint is going to be huge. The annoying thing is I'm going to have to go back and switch some of her gears around. So yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty big win for Little Queen Charlotte, though. We'll see if she's actually going to be used as a counterpick into Abyssal Euphine. I'm probably going to be using her into Abyssal Euphine, but yeah, we'll see when it gets released how often she gets picked as a result. Okay, moving on here, top model Luluka. Oh my god, this is a unit that I think people kind of just overlooked. Top model Luluka is a unit that I felt like kind of needed a little bit of a change up, a little bit of switch up, because she just she was good for a while, especially with that mage frenzy. During that time when mages got like additional, I think 7 speed or something in RTA, it was insane, but that was when she was really shining. Now, we'll get to the mage constellations later. That also helps her out a ton. But what happened was she lost her soul burn on her S1, so no longer getting to like 2-tap units, right? Like soul burn to a Spirit Isoline and kill her. You can't do that anymore. It's still RNG, 40% chance. They took that soul burn away and they actually gave her soul burn to her S3, so it increases the damage dealt when she nukes, which is kind of nice. It'll be kind of good for seeing her extinct units, right, and all that good stuff. But let's go ahead and see what they got for the S2. They actually switched a couple things around. It's kind of a rearrangement more than a buff. So she used to increase combat readiness of everybody by 20% when she uses her S2. They actually switched that over to the S3. So she increases combat readiness by 20% when she uses her S3. So she'll S3, defeat somebody, inflict extinction, all that good stuff, and then she pushes everybody up as well. That's actually quite nice because now you don't have to use a non-attack skill to push up your team. And that's something that I feel like we're kind of lacking a little bit of. Of course, Politica is a unit that can push up the team with a attack skill, but she's not a DPS unit. So this actually kind of puts top model Luluka in a similar in kind of a similar position as Minegalilius. Minegalilius procs though, like a animation. I don't think top model Luluka will proc an animation here. It's just going to be an S3, and after the S3, it's going to push everybody up. Kind of like how Ida kind of pushes up and stuff like that, right? So that's going to be pretty good. I think that's going to be kind of nice. Now, she also gains an attack buff before she attacks. So she increases attack for 3 turns, and then she'll be able to attack with the S3, which is kind of cool. She no longer needs this S2 to grant the attack buff for herself, right? Which is kind of nice. But what the S2 does do now is it grants a barrier to herself for 3 turns and increases attack of everyone else except herself. So that's also pretty good. What I mean by that in terms of pretty good is she doesn't need to attack buff herself to attack now, right? You can just go S3 somebody, nuke somebody, and push up combat readiness. It comes at the cost of not having the attack buff on everyone else, but if there's something like a Selene or a Politis or something else on the other side, you don't have to risk going for the S2 to S3 and guarantee the kill. You still get the attack buff, you still get all that damage, but I think this is a pretty good change, right? A slight rearrangement of skills. You can even soul burn, right? She can even hold book now, because I think a lot of people were running Dignus Orb, so you don't need Dignus Orb anymore with her S2 here. She essentially has Dignus Orb built into her S2 now, so I think it's pretty cool. I think that was a very popular artifact that was run on her, but now you just run book, because every mage can run book. It's the broken artifact. But yeah, I think top model Luluka is pretty nice now. Again, I'm not a really proficient aggro player or a cleaver. I actually don't have top model Luluka. I really want to get her, especially after these changes. I think she's going to be pretty good, but if you're an aggro or cleaver, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Love to know your thoughts on this, but I think the switch up is pretty nice just to play around certain counter picks into her, right, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have Requiem Rana. So she's a unit that I felt like needed a slight tweak, not necessarily because she was bad. She found a really good niche. You can build her with like 250, 300, 350 effectiveness, essentially, and no high-res unit can stand in your way. Requiem Rana will just reset things like my DJB, your Destinas, all that stuff. Anyone that's not immunity, she's resetting, she's pushing back. And that was a bit of an issue, especially paired with things like Ron and Zio and things like that, right? Now, the one part of her kit that never made any sense to anybody was that her damage increases every time you use her S3. But you use her S3 like once a match, and then it's over, because you're using her in an aggro or cleave team. You're really not using her outside of that, right? And she's not very viable outside of that either. So this is actually a pretty good change, just taking this away. This was absolutely worthless in terms of an effect on her. It's like if LRK, I mean, it's the same as LRK's effect, right? If LRK didn't do any damage. The other thing that they changed, which is actually really good, is that this combat readiness thing, this increase, it used to only activate once per turn, but now it doesn't. It can activate multiple times, which means if you're using someone like Flitica, you can S2, Flitica takes another turn, Requiem Rana will jump another 100% combat readiness, and that's pretty big. When that happens, you know, because Requiem Rana can get cut by other units, so especially if they have something like a Politis and stuff like that that can kind of cut your combat readiness increases in half, right? So if you're able to take that second turn with somebody and you prevent yourself from getting cut by a unit, that's pretty nice. So removing that restriction, it's very niche, it's almost never going to come up, but for those of you guys who use Requiem Rana, I think you'll appreciate this change. But yeah, overall, I think it's pretty good. The other thing is that she is going to be dispelling a buff as well. So this dispelling a buff is huge. That was one of Requiem Rana's biggest weaknesses, was people with immunity. So now if you're facing a whole team with immunity and you open with something like a Zeo, you know, you can go ahead and strip all those immunities, reset everybody, and that is going to be a pain to deal with. This is going to be a huge pain to deal with, because the counter to Requiem Rana used to be put immunity set on your units, now not so much. Alright, well, at least she doesn't ignore resist. Yet. Let's move on here. We got 4-star change Clarissa. So Clarissa here, when she defeats an enemy with her Hysteric, right, this move, she resets the skill cooldown, which is kind of nice. The reason being is that they also upped her defense break chance from 50% to 70%. So this is pretty good for any PvE players out there. You can go ahead and use this skill, defense break, especially if you're farming Wyvern and stuff, right? Clear out the trash mobs with Clarissa, and then you still have this skill reset. So you can have a higher chance to defense break the boss, the Wyvern, on the next turn. And they increase the damage dealt as well. So it's going to help lower the gear requirements for those Wyvern runs, right? I don't know if this negatively impacts anybody. I know sometimes with PvE changes, it will negatively impact some players, and there are really niche setups for other content in the game. But if that does impact you, let me know in the comments. I would love to see what you guys are using Clarissa for, if you're using her at all. All right. Next up, I think this is huge, Falconer Kluri. Okay, Falconer Kluri specifically, you have to get the specialty change version of her. This rune, for increased damage for her S1, is now changed to inflict resource reduction by 40%. Now, this can only activate on her turn, so if you're running a counter Falconer Kluri, it's not going to really activate here. But 40% is huge. That's 40% fighting spirit. That is 2 bars of focus. That is pretty big, especially with, if you guys are veteran players and you know what Falconer Kluri is like, Falconer Kluri will just lap your team over and over and over again. She is insane. And she used to be even more insane. She was nerfed in the past. But yeah, Falconer Kluri now has a really good niche in that she can inflict resource reduction on a lot of popular characters out there. And, you know, even aside from ML Landy and Abyssal Fiend, you can use her against... her S3 is really good for controlling, now her S1 as well. You can use her against Lionheart, Sirmia, you can use her against ML Bolognas, right? You can use her against so many other units, Apoc Ravi. So many units rely on fighting spirit, rely on focus to get their ultimate skills off, to get their S3s off, right? So Falconer Kluri being a legit control unit, because, you know, Zahhak's EE, no one's using that, and... They just absolutely refuse to specialty change Penelope. So Falconer Kluri now, I guess, is our way to use resource reduction reliably. And I love to see it. I can't wait to test her out. I really, really like her. She's one of my favorite units in the game, and I have her built, but she's just not very viable in the meta as she stands right now. But this might change things, especially given that she's a knight and she has access to all the knight artifacts that allow you to bring more utility to the team, right? Damage mitigation and all that stuff. Okay, so next up, artifacts. Victorious Flag is no longer with these conditions of being at an elemental advantage, right? Or being at an elemental advantage when being attacked, right? Attacking or being attacked. Sorry, I should have clarified. So when you're at elemental advantage, your damage dealt increases by 16%. If you're at a disadvantage, or sorry, if you're at advantage while being attacked, so if you're fighting someone, they have a disadvantage against you, you decrease damage by a further 16%. It's insane. The issue with this is that it's really only used in PvE content because it's very specific, very niche. Now they changed it so that in general, when you're attacking, damage now increases by 16%, and when you're being attacked, damage taken decreases by 16%. This is an insane artifact because it's generic. You can use it on anybody you want, except this effect only applies to RGB units, which is actually kind of cool, and it can only be applied to one hero within a team, so kind of like the other like Proof of Valors and stuff like that, right? Now, this is huge because 16% is essentially the damage mitigation that you'd get from Adamant Shield, right, on a Knight, except that protects just from crits. This protects from all damage sources, so even, you know, non-crit damage, right? If you're an evasion unit and they miss on you, you get to reduce the damage taken on that as well. So this is pretty cool. I can't wait to see what units can use this. I'm going to be looking through my roster and trying to figure out somebody that can put this on. But yeah, it's going to be nice. Really, really nice. And the fact that they limited to RGBs is also pretty cool. I like that concept because, again, ML units tend to dominate the RTA scene just because they don't get punished by the frenzy mechanic as much, where you do 30% less damage against somebody that has elemental advantage against you, right? So I don't know if this would actually be really good in RTA. I mean, because the damage reduction effect is, when it's granted, only the strongest effect applies. So I think the RTA Frenzy actually overrides this, correct me if I'm wrong, but you at least get the 16% extra damage. It's kind of like a Symbol of Unity type of damage, Portrait of Savior's sort of damage increase, right? Not bad. Alright, moving on here, the Rage. So this is kind of like Mort's buff that he gets after he has 3s. So Rage is really small. It's really negligible. Attack and speed increased by 10% is not that great. They doubled it, so it's now 20%. That's actually a pretty good increase. The speed especially, 20% extra speed is great. Stack that up with a speed buff and you're going to be zooming, right? So this is, I think, an overall good change. It's not really going to impact the units that currently exist, but keep this in mind when units get released in the future. They might just see this Rage buff. I have a feeling that's about to happen. All right, and last but not least, we gotta talk about this, guys. This is huge. The Constellation balance adjustments. They did this before in the past with some Soul Weavers, namely things like DJB, Tamarin, and stuff like that, right? And I gotta say, this is pretty good. So you're gonna see that these awakened stats, right, they're gonna be changing. So we're gonna see a lot more crit rate on certain units like damage dealers. You're gonna see increased speed on certain speed contesters or openers, and we'll just go through the stats for every type of unit, right? So let's ignore this mage stuff at the top here. Let's just look at the specific units. For 5 stars, for the Leo mages, we have Eternal Wanderer Ludwig, Melissa, and Roy. These units are all getting a free 8% crit rate. That's a huge change. Nothing else has changed, right? The only thing is that they get free 8% crit rate. That's massive. Crit rate, that's like 2 rolls of crit rate, 2 mid rolls of crit rate, right? And this allows you to free up a lot of stats. A lot of stats that can go into speed, can go into attack, can go into crit damage, whatever you need. But this is a really, really good change, especially for people who love using Ludwig for cleaves, especially people like me who love using Roy in standard. So yeah, definitely love to see it. For the 3 stars here for the Leos, we see Misty Chain. She is going to get a slight attack increase, which is not really too important, but she does get that 8% crit as well. Misty Chain is mostly used in PvE content, if at all, so it's not really too important for RTA purposes. For Virgo Mages, here we go. Architect Laika, who I actually recently built. You'll see a video of her coming out very, very soon in the coming days. And Calric, so Fire Calric. This is massive because they just got a 2 speed increase. This is important because you're like, oh, 2 speed plus 2 speed to my unit, woohoo. It's actually even better than that because this is their base speed. So when you add things like speed sets and stuff like that on top, it is going to increase more than that. So you're going to see more than a 2 speed increase for your units for sure. This is pretty good, right? Pretty good. 121 base speed is very nice. It's putting them in the higher like tier of speed. So you can actually use them to more, you can contest them more reliably. Right, contest with them. Okay, moving on here, top model Luluka, so we just went over her buff, and Vivian as well. So these are the Sagittarius mages, so both of these units are getting a 4 speed increase. That is insane. This makes Tomoka, by the way, at 115 base speed, that's about Flitika's base speed, if you want a comparison. Top model Luluka is going to be 119 base speed now. She is going to be one of the best openers that CR pushes that we have. And that's insane. I love that. 119 base speed is phenomenal. Vivian also gets that speed boost, kind of good too. She does want to be fast, and they can lower gear requirements for certain things like Banshee one-shots and other stuff like that, where you need a speed tune. I will say though, I'm definitely going to be affected by this. If you have a perfectly speed-tuned Vivian in Banshee, be careful after this, because you might need to tune your speed and stuff to make sure you're not screwing up your runs. So, little PSA on that one. Moving on, we got Carrot, Researcher Carrot, and Adley. All these units are also getting a 4 speed increase, so that's fantastic. As a Carrot lover myself, I'm definitely going to appreciate this one. Free stats, I'll welcome. Okay, for Pisces Mages, these are their Awakened stats that are going to be changing here, and what we're going to see is that Alots, first of all, so all these units, by the way, are going to be losing their crit chance awakenings, which is good because most Pisces mages are just support units. And we see an increase in health and increase in speed. This is going to be huge for Alots. Look at Alots here. From 112 base speed to 117 base speed. Alots is going to be faster than Flitica now, and it's going to be absolutely insane. He also loses all this worthless crit rate, and it brings him down 15%, and it increases his bulk, so he can survive longer. This is fantastic. Love to see it. Harado as well. I wish they'd just give him a specialty change. It'd be kind of nice, but he gets increased bulk, more speed, which is good. 111 is pretty slow. It's like molasses, right? But 115, you're starting to look at it a little bit better, and that worthless crit rate is gone as well. But yeah, I think this is going to be a fantastic patch. If they continue to adjust things like these star signs, I think in the future we're going to be seeing some more units be viable, even without their kits being completely overhauled and changed and stuff, right? Just increasing those base stats makes them able to keep up with the meta and the ever-changing landscape of RTA. But yeah, with that being said though, guys, let me know what you guys think of these balance adjustments in the comment section down below. Love to hear from you as always. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more Epic 7 content. And until next time, take care.